The Bluebird app has had us all in a chokehold ever since it was launched in 2006, but as with all social media platforms, it does have its critics, one of the loudest ones being Joe Rogan. The podcaster used to log on to Twitter pretty frequently, but has now spoken up about why he's limited his time there. Intrigued? Let's find out what the app did to piss off Rogan this time. First of all, Rogan believes the app's become a mental institution. If you've been a fan of the comedian turned podcaster for a long while, you'll remember the days when he actually used to take to Twitter to post a random wandering here and a fleeting thought there. For the past few years though, his account's been going through a pretty dry spell and fans are a little confused. After all, Rogan's entire job as a podcast host is to talk about current events for hours on end with influential figures. In episode 1855 of the JRE podcast with Substack creator Chris Best, the pair talked about why exactly Twitter's environment these days put them off of the app. Rogan had quite the vehement views on the activities going on inside the app. He even likened it to a mental institution, where all the people did was argue aimlessly. Ever the sarcastic comedian, he called Twitter users monkeys and said that the constant barrage of tweets wasn't unlike primates throwing at each other. He also mentioned that the app had an addictive quality as it encouraged users to participate in recreational outrage. We have to say, the man does have a way with words. He was clearly in his zone, as he kept slandering the way people used the app nowadays. When referring to the daily trends, he said that most of the time he couldn't figure out just how people had it in themselves to care so much about things that basically had little or no effect on their lives. We might have to agree on this one. Think about it yourself. How many times have you been checking what's trending for the day and come across some random obscure celebrity that's apparently being canceled for eating a burrito the wrong way? Hypothetically, of course. So why does the former comedian still have a running account on the Bird app? Well, it seems that Twitter's algorithm certainly knows how to keep its users hooked, because even after having talked absolute about it, Rogan still hasn't opted for completely deactivating his account. If you follow him, you've obviously noted that the man merely only uses Twitter these days for advertising his own comedy gigs or promoting another stand-up comedian's specials. Maybe once in a while he'll retweet an interesting article that caught his eye, but his usage doesn't exceed these simple actions. Don't be fooled though, it pretty much goes without saying that not posting much on social media definitely doesn't mean you're not using the app 24/7. As Joe revealed in his podcast episode with Chris Best, he does scroll through Twitter for several minutes in the morning to catch up on what's new that day. You hear that, folks? Even busy celebs like Joe Rogan consider Twitter their morning newspaper, and rightfully so. After all, the Bird app does give you short and fast updates on exactly what went down in the world while you were asleep. He did say, though, that he's muted his mentions completely and doesn't check notifications at all, stating that the community is poisoned. He implied that this is better for his mental health in the long run. Even on JRE episode 1850 with Whitney Cummings, Rogan replied to Whitney's theory about comedians losing their charm because of Twitter with more disdain for the app. That's why I don't go on it. These people are all toxic. They're all out of their effing minds, was his opinion. Seems like someone's been on the receiving end of one too many Twitter warriors, huh? Apparently, according to Rogan, short-form conversation is not it. Considering how active he is on Instagram and his podcast, it doesn't really make much sense for Joe to have this extreme bias against Twitter specifically, right? Well, to add to his elaborate list of reasons for disliking the app, one is how it encourages short-form conversation. We guess it shouldn't be a surprise that the man who hosts hour-long podcasts with political and pop figures isn't the biggest fan of just randomly tweeting a sentence out into the void. In fact, the longest JRE episode was the one with Duncan Trussell, and it came out to be a whopping 5 hours and 19 minutes. If someone is able to keep smooth conversation running for that long, we can kinda get where he's coming from. He stated in the past that he believes a brief expression of one's views limits them. And if there's one thing we know about Rogan, it's that he stands by his beliefs resolutely. The man even thinks late night shows are too short to fully cover all the topics and tangents he'd like to cover with a podcast guest. Of course, the app that limits users to 280 characters per tweet only might be slightly off-putting to him. Talking about an Instagram post of fellow comedian and and two-time podcast guest Nikki Glazer, where she expressed her delight at getting to know Seth Meyers for 7 minutes, Rogan was pretty dismissive. He emphasized that you can't possibly get to know someone in 7 minutes, and that Twitter was exactly the same. Even when he had Louis C.K. on his podcast, he approved the comedian's tactic of just taking every single tweet with a grain of salt. Louis claimed that he just never took people's tweets seriously anymore, and Rogan nodded his agreement. It's no wonder then that Joe has chosen to limit his Twitter time as much as possible, rather than constantly engage with people he considers toxic. More power to him. Now, onto other related news. Joe Rogan fires back on Seth Dillon over abortion stance. Things got heated on the 1857th episode of the JRE podcast with the Babylon Bee CEO when he tried to express his pro-life stance on abortion. As you may well know, this is a topic Rogan has discussed endlessly with his guests, and usually the conversation remains respectful even if they're on the opposing sides of the argument. This time though, Seth Dillon refused to back off his pro-life standpoint even when the issue of rape came up, a line where most pro-lifers sit back and agree on its immorality. Basically, he argued that two wrongs don't make a right, and that even if a woman has been raped, she should carry out the pregnancy. He also used the much recycled claim that there were numerous people who had been born of rape that now opposed pro-choice people, saying that everyone deserves to have a shot at life. Rogan was pretty wound up as he responded with telling Dillon that he had no right to tell a 14-year-old girl to have a baby after she'd been raped. Clearly indicating his own 14-year-old daughter, Rogan snapped that she was a child and that Dillon didn't understand how traumatic it would be to tell her to carry her rapist's child. Eventually, Dillon backed off from his claims. UFC's August event will have Joe Rogan in the commentator trio. The UFC 278 pay-per-view event is scheduled for Sunday, 21st of August at 3 a.m. GMT, and fans are extremely excited to see Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards butt heads in their welterweight championship match. Not only that, the return of former champion Luke Rockhold after nearly 3 years is going to be one of a watch as well. The commentary roster, though, is going to be just as exciting. Sources close to MMA fighting have revealed that Joe Rogan, along with Jon Anik and Daniel Cormier, are going to be on the commentary roster, and we can assure you the trio will definitely not disappoint. We already saw their electrifying commentary in UFC 276 and UFC 277, both times with Rogan present. This time around will be Joe's third commentary gig since July. Megan O'Leary will also be present as the roving reporter throughout. And lastly, MMA judge Seth Fuller responds to Joe Rogan's criticisms. During UFC 277, MMA judge Seth Fuller put up a scorecard that's been facing some controversy lately. Immediately after he showed it, Joe Rogan could be heard among the fellow commentators Jon Anik and Daniel Cormier expressing his disapproval of the move. Cormier first said that the score seemed unwarranted, and then Rogan chimed in by saying that Fuller needed a talking to, and that they'll need to check what he's bet on. The scoreboard in question was when Fuller scored the heavyweight prelim fight between Hamdi Abdelwahab and Dontel Mays, a 29-28 in favor of Mays. On the other hand, judges Kent Basinger and Dan Matheson scored the fight 29-28 for Abdelwahab. This seemingly innocent decision was met by outrage by fans of UFC, and Fuller even received a hateful message from an anonymous person saying that even the commentators were clowning him and that he was idiotic to have given it to Mays. Apparently, Fuller wasn't even aware of any controversy until after he left the arena and got the text. In his statement, he said that he had thick skin and could take the criticism, but they weren't factual. Even though judges aren't allowed to speak about fights, the judge responded to all criticisms in a 30-minute video. That's all the Joe Rogan Twitter hate fiesta news we had for you today. Do you think his arguments hold weight? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.